Howdy, howdy, howdy. My name is Nacho Sasuke, and welcome back to Reading 001. In the last episode, we witnessed Calvin deal with the Blackbird and also possibly traumatize the rest of his crew. And also, Aaron Siegel has mobilized his forces, which I'm almost positive his forces are another SCP because it sounded familiar, but I can't remember which SCP it was. And now we're up to 054, the Ambassador, who is a Persian male with Iranian/Armenian ancestry, and I don't even almost know what that sounds like, so I guess I'll just try to make him sound proper. French heritage. Appears to be in his early 30s. Some sources have provided records indicating that 054 was, in his youth, French actor Jean Lemieux Bertrand, born Jean Ebrahimi. Ebrahimi? Since most evidence of 054's exploits were apparently destroyed shortly after his appointment to the Overseer Council, little is known about his professional career. Commonly called the Ambassador, 054 is called to action whenever the Council needs a pretty face. Often described as being incredibly attractive and anomalously charismatic, he has acted as the Foundation's salesman wherever required. Sources indicate he was first tasked with drawing American attention away from Mexico during the Second World War, likely due to the severe anomalous activity taking place there at the same time. Despite being well-spoken and appearing generally well-educated, 054 is not an academic, nor is he particularly interested in the prospect of managing an organization. He is well known for delegating any duties he might accrue in order to maintain as little responsibility as possible. This lackadaisical attitude towards leadership was manipulated by 057, who convinced the ambassador to give her an unofficial automatic vote for anything she might support. Yeah, she would. Well, she did, but she's gone now, haha! So we're up to chapter 10 now. Loyalties. Before. 13 chairs with 13 occupants sat around a long ovular table in a cavernous chamber deep beneath the earth. On the walls around them were screens, many of which were displaying vital statistical information of some relevance, and others which were live feeds of hallways, courtyards, laboratories, and holding cells. The screens were ignored, though, in favor of something lying in the center of the long table, something long and sleek with a dark wooden shaft and an etched steel spearhead. "Well, I'll be damned," the American said, leaning in to look at it closer. "You actually got it done." The outsider stood from her seat and pulled out a packet of papers. "Yes, well, with no shortage of effort, there are plenty of things you can accomplish." Blackbird smiled from his seat near the end of the table. "Plenty of things, yes, great and terrible things. The Egyptians murdered thousands to build their pyramids." "I believe the pyramids were actually built by Elvis and Tupac," the accountant said, "though I may be confusing that with Atlantis." They all laughed. "Ooh, what does it do?" the lesser said. An uncomfortable nothingness at the end of the table stirred, causing the air to chill suddenly. A voice came out of it, not one quiet but intense and difficult to listen to. "This is the spear of the non-believer," the other overseer said. "The godless lance of old King Saurus." The spectral horror hummed softly. "Fascinating." The outsider came around the table. Or I guess the other overseer is the one that's deaf. Technically. The outsider came around the table, handing each of them folders out of her packet of information. "To answer your question, the short answer is probably a lot. The longer answer is that we're not sure. Ever since we contained the last of the four great demons and gained access to Apollyon's tomb, we've been studying the texts found there to learn more about this spear. It obviously had some importance to the king, or else it wouldn't have been where it was, and it wouldn't have cost so much blood to get it." She pulled out a remote and flashed it at the largest monitor in the room, one that hung on the far wall. It showed the interior of a tomb, dusty and dark, with the spear hanging by a silver chain over a large stone sarcophagus. The next image was text from a book written in a language few of them recognized. "Is that Deva?" the Blackbird said bemusedly. "Written in shorthand, so not by a Davite. Where was this?" "In the tomb," the outsider said. Based on the information, I don't remember which one the outsider was. I'm not even sure if we've met them yet. It might be the crazy lady with the snake. "Based on the information we've gathered from these books, it's likely that these passages were written by other Davite. I can check. Hold on. The other overseer is the one that's actually deaf. The accountant, liar, The archivist. So it's not that one. The outsider. Okay, the outsider is the lady who was super sad and took herself down. Okay. It's likely that these passages were written by other Davite captives or slaves or were stolen from Davite libraries. Why they were buried with Apollyon, I'm not sure. However, there are several tombs in this collection that speak about that spear directly, indicating that it predates the kingdom by centuries and may even predate the Davites. I don't know how to pronounce that. Devites? Divites? Divites? A lack of written historical records beyond that point would make it difficult to narrow down, but we have reason to believe that even to these ancient civilizations it was considered a legendary weapon. The lesser rapped his knuckles on the table in frustration. I understand all of that, but I want a short answer. Why is this important, and why did we spend so many disposables on attaining it? The American shot him a look. It kills gods, Baron. If you throw it at a god, that god will die. He waved his hands around in the air. Poof! Just like that! The Lesser's face scrunched up uncomfortably. That's just preposterous. You can't kill gods. Oh, yes. Alright. Oh, yes, the other overseer said calmly. You certainly can. It is a remarkably difficult feat, accomplished by only a handful throughout all of time. But there have been terribly powerful beings consigned to oblivion before. The archivist began flipping through a book on the desk in front of her quickly. Yes, if my records are accurate, which they likely are, since they did not have to be translated, and we're not sitting in a cave, the outsider shot her a blistering look. There are legends going back thousands of years, maybe more, about different weapons that could kill gods. Why is the archivist stuttering? I thought the archivist was this, the lady who was super sure of herself. Isn't the archivist the lady who's super sure of herself? Liar. The accountant. Yeah! The accountant is the lady who became the snake god. Why would she be stuttering? Let's see. About different weapons that could kill gods. Usually swords, arrows, that sort of thing. Most have been either confirmed to be fakes or lost to antiquity, but perhaps the most enduring legend is this one, the spear. In fact, there have not been any such stories about such powerful weapons in all of modern history. Why did she not know what it was if she very clearly knows what it is now? Well, the other overseer said with a light littling to its response, there was one. At the other end of the long table, the figure sitting in shadow at its head shifted in its seat. Yes, Diane, thank you, the outsider said, annoyed. One of the oldest legends regarding the spear involved Lucifer, the figure from Christian mythology, and that story, she clicked the remote again, and the next image was what could very tenuously be called a book. When God smote Lucifer, a shard of his iron crown fell to the earth with him and was found by Cain. The same story details how Cain used the shard to kill Abel, not a rock, and that he crafted the spear out of his brother's bones once he realized its terrible power. The table was silent for a moment. What a crock of shit! The liar said, kicking their feet up onto the table and cackling. I know bullshit when I see it, and that is bullshit. Now, a sickly sweet voice danced across the table. You know how much Mr. Siegel doesn't like people putting their feet up on the table now, honey. We've been over this before. The liar pulled their feet back all quickly. Sorry, ma'am. Green leaned forward into the light. I thought Green had an extra E in it. A narrow pair of rectangular spectacles perched on the end of her nose. Oh, it's no worry. I just don't want anyone getting distracted today. We have such important work to do. She looked across the table to the American. Rufus, do you have anywhere we can put this where nobody will be able to get it? I mean, no. I ain't got nowhere you just shove things where there won't be unassociated persons digging around. Can we not just keep it here? Green shook her head. No, here won't do. We need to put this somewhere close enough that we can get to it if we need it, but not far enough away that it'll never be used against us. She tapped her finger against her chin. Anyone have any ideas? The room was silent. She sighed. What about you, Mr. Roboto? She seemed to say to nobody specific. Suddenly the screens in the room blackened and each was replaced by a dark gray circle with arrows and a pulsing red spot at its center. You have anywhere we can keep this? She said. You are asking if I know of a location more secure than the one you are currently sitting in, the display read. The answer is no. There is no location more secure than this one. Well, it has to be somewhere, right? Is there nowhere we can... She was silent suddenly by the ringing of a phone at the far end of the table. The figure in the shadows there looked down towards it, and on the third ring extended a hand and picked up the receiver. They spoke in hushed tones for a moment, and then sat the receiver back down. The table watched this figure silently. I don't know who the founder... Oh, the founder is probably Aaron. Sophia will take it, the founder said, his voice soft. She can keep it hidden out of time, with no opportunity for it to be disturbed in any way. He looked down at his watch, and then back up at the table. For our purposes, you would all do well to keep your distance from this. The ambassador furrowed his brow, confused. One moment, sir, if I might. L'Americaine says this is a spear for killing gods, yes? Why then would it be any danger to us? We are not gods, no. The founder smiled gently. Jean, you give yourself too little credit. He looked back down at the table. Diane, Rufus, Mortimer, assign as many of your assets as you feel comfortable to Donna's team at the Apollyon site. Sophia, he looked at the figure in the shadows just beside him, who did not move. Take this away. Find somewhere to keep it safe. I trust you. The figure flickered slightly, and then both it and the spear were gone, and the table in unison realized it had never been there at all. Wait, Sophia was the thing at the end of the table? I thought the thing at the end of the table was the death guy. What's Sophia, then? And which member of the Overseers is she? I don't know, now. The hum of the jet's engines were the only sound that filled the cabin as Sylvester Sloane's plane cruised through the skies. He and Calvin sat at a table together near the front of the plane. They had been talking a moment before, but now they sat staring at a television mounted at the front of the cabin. The sound was off, but the message was clear. The newsreel read, French billionaire Jean Lemuel Bertrand cancels appearance at Jove Festival in South Africa, citing security concerns. Olivia was watching too. Her complexion had not improved much, but her eyes were focused. Jean Bertrand. That's the ambassador, isn't it? She squinted at the screen. Is he always so... public? That's what he does, Sloane growled. The pretty face of the Foundation's PR efforts. Not really one to miss a party, though. He scratched his chin. Something must be up. Suddenly, the light on the cabin phone lit up with a soft beeping. Sloane walked over to it and pressed a button. Does a black moon howl? It never stopped, the voice of a woman's replied. Good evening, Priscilla. What can I help you with? The woman on the other end tutted at him. Have you retrieved our agents? Sloane looked back at the three of them, his nose turned up slightly. Might as well call it that. What do you need? You've no doubt seen the news, she said. The ambassador's cancelled his plans for tonight. What you may find interesting is why. Not an hour ago, we received a call from him, verified identity and all, and he informed us that he had cancelled his plans because he wants to meet with us to discuss terms. Terms? Terms of what? Surrender, Norris said. There are only a few of them left now, and he's seeing the light at the end of the tunnel or right off a sinking ship. Sylvester looked at Calvin, who was still staring at the television. This feels like a trap, Priscilla, he said slowly. What is he expecting to gain from this? His life, she said. He said he'll gladly stand trial. He just doesn't want to die. Sloane pursed his lips. Not surprising, the coward. What's he willing to offer? Information and his resignation. He says he can tell us where the all-seeing eye is. Calvin looked back down towards the phone and then back at Olivia and Adam. Olivia was staring at him, her face still stricken from her time with the Blackbird. Adam had not looked away from the window since they got on the plane. Calvin sighed. Who does he want to talk to? Norris scoffed. Myself, of course. As our chief diplomat, I alone have the authority to parley with him. More like she'd like to get him alone and fuck him. Sloane whispered, his voice little more than a growl. Is Norris also Priscilla? Is Norris also Priscilla, or is Norris someone else? You'll need a security detail, Calvin said. You'll need to move quickly. I'm not an amateur, Mr. Lucian, she scoffed. I'll not be told how to do my job. Nah, I still don't like it, Sloane interrupted. You have no idea what his intentions are. Of course not, because we haven't met yet, Sylvester. That's what diplomacy is for. Besides, the decision has already been made. I will go meet him tonight and bring him back to Delta for further questioning. Once we've gotten what we need from him, we'll hold on to him until this all blows over, and then he'll be free to go. The decision has been made, Sloane barked. Yes, Sylvester, we called a vote shortly after he contacted us. If you wanted to participate, you shouldn't have run off on your own courier mission when we could have sent a thank you card and a hot air balloon to accomplish the same thing. You can't just leave whenever you want. We're at war, after all. The grinding of Sloane's teeth was pronounced. Where is this exchange taking place? Oh, our Tambo International, she responded. Why, you're not thinking of... So was it Priscilla? Them going back and forth between Priscilla and Norris, when they never established Norris also being Priscilla. Whatever. Sloane dropped the phone back on the cradle and sighed. Priscilla is a skilled diplomat, but this is above her abilities, I'm afraid. Bertrand is notoriously anonymously charismatic. I wasn't even joking about her wanting to fuck him either. She's a good talker, but not what I would call clever or self-aware. What do you want to do? Calvin said. I don't know. Your two compatriots there are in no shape to be going back out there. I don't want Priscilla handling this alone, so I need to go and intercept her before anything happens. I don't know where you're at right now. Are you alright? Calvin shrugged. I've been worse. Then you can come with me. We'll land at Tambo and depart, and I'll send these two back to Delta and out of harm's way. Agreed? Calvin nodded. Agreed. Hours later, and after a bout of fitful sleep, they landed in Johannesburg with little fanfare. As they prepared to disembark, Sloane pointed towards another plane sitting on the far end of the tarmac. The lettering on the side bore the words Distant Horizons Airlines. That's a Foundation front. He's here. So the SCP Foundation does know how to name their shit without it just being called SCP. Huh. How about that? Calvin gathered his things and moved to leave, then hesitated. He turned back towards Olivia and Adam, both of whom probably will be watching. Their faces were sullen. Stay here, he said. I'll come back for you once this is over. Olivia nodded, but Adam barely moved. His eyes were locked on Calvin's face, and there was an intensity there that Calvin didn't know how to respond to. Instead, he nodded in response and left the plane. So I guess it was not a father-son relationship between Adam and Calvin in his universe. He and Sloane crossed the tarmac towards the airport, where a small group of individuals Calvin identified as insurgency operatives were waiting for them by a side door. As they approached, Sloane pulled out a silver ring out of his pocket and held it up for them to see. Acknowledging the identification, the agents pulled the doors open and accompanied them inside. They proceeded down several long hallways until one agent ushered them into a side door. The room beyond was small. Okay, so Priscilla Norris is the same person. Thanks for telling me that now. Likely a meeting room for airport employees. Sitting at the table was a suddenly extremely aggravated Priscilla Norris, as well as a man in a clean, crisp tan blazer, with a light blue shirt and a dark blue tan slacks. Blue tan? As they entered the room, the man stood and smiled, though when he caught Calvin's gaze, he hesitated. Nobody else seemed to notice, and the man played it off quickly. Sylvester, Norris said, seething. What are you doing here? Sloane smiled as he extended his hand towards the man in the tan jacket. Enjoying the weather, Priscilla. I haven't been this far south in ages. It's good for my old flappy skin. He turned towards the man and took his hand. Sylvester Sloane. A pleasure. The man's smile was striking, Calvin noticed. He was unusually handsome, with dark hair pulled back into a short bun behind his head and a rich complexion with no blemishes to speak of. His eyes were dark green, and when he laughed, it sounded like music and falling water. I guess I should probably give him some sort of accent. Jean Bertrand, the pleasure is all mine, the man said. Thank you for coming so far to meet with me, Mr. Sloane. I was just telling Miss Norris that I hope I have not inconvenienced you too terribly. Sloane waved him off. Calvin watched him and realized that despite the performance he was putting on, Sylvester was very carefully watching the windows and listening. It's no problem at all, of course, Sloane gestured back towards Calvin, who bowed slightly. You're familiar with my colleague, Calvin Lucian? Bertrand's face froze for an instant before relaxing back to its natural position. Yes, the man hunting overseers. He extended a hand to Calvin as well, who shook it. You have really shaken things to their core, Mr. Lucian. Calvin didn't respond, but they shared a look that spoke volumes of the tension in the room. Bertrand motioned for them all to sit, and they did. I will be as concise as I can, he said, because I do have a tendency to rattle on. Your actions, Mr. Lucian, have destabilized the Foundation. There are now crucial functions that were once performed by my colleagues that are no longer active. In the past, I would have reached out to Green or Rufus for their wisdom in these trying times, but they are also absent. He adjusted his jacket slightly. That's why I've come to you. I am a realist, and despite my years of service to the Foundation's goals, I value my own longevity over any ideology. Besides, By the look of things, your ideology is winning out against theirs. Perhaps it is time to begin reconsidering. Besides this, he continued, I possess what you might call an acute ability to feel things, people. I can read people easily, it is no problem. Even large groups I feel very comfortable around because I know how they are feeling. This, though, is much different. There is something massive moving within the Foundation, something very powerful. Its power is radiating out from Overwatch Command and it grows stronger every day. Calvin thought then about the presence he had felt in the warehouse and in the spire, something large looking down on him like he might look at a dust mite. The Founder, Calvin said. Aaron Siegel. Bertrand looked at him and nodded slowly. This is most likely. I am a single man, and while I may be the ambassador of the Foundation, I'm not eager to stand between this power and its goal. Instead, I would like to see it snuffed out. From what I understand, you are in possession of tools capable of doing this. He laid his hands palm up on the table. Here's what I offer. I know the location of the Overwatch Command as well as many other Foundation black sites. I can show you where they are hidden. I have knowledge, practical knowledge about the Foundation that you might find useful. Once this is over, perhaps your organization will need assistance in cleaning up the mess that has been made. I have contacts in many organizations, and I am well known. A valuable resource. Norris nodded. Yes, we would eagerly accept your services, Jean. Bertrand looked at her, and his eyes flashed for a moment. Calvin looked around and realized that, once again, he seemed to be the only one who noticed it. He caught Bertrand looking at him from the corner of his eye, seemingly surprised about something. Norris, however, carried on. We should get you out of here and to safety. There's no telling what sort of erratic and dangerous response the Foundation might... As if on cue, they heard someone shout in the distance. This was followed by more voices, and then a line of rippling bullets fired from some sort of powerful automatic weapon. Everyone in the room stood suddenly as Norris' security team filled out into the hallway. More gunshots filled the air. When Calvin looked back, he saw that Bertrand had gone pale. That's them, he said. They've come for me. God, they're going to kill me. I don't think so, Sloan said, grabbing the man by his jacket and pulling him into the hall. Norris followed behind them, and then Calvin. As they passed, Sloan addressed Norris' detail. If you see any hostiles, put them down. We'll deal with the fallout later. They scampered down another long hallway until it opened up into a cafeteria. Employees of the airport were milling about, but the group suddenly gathered their attention. Sloan pushed Bertrand forward as more gunshots echoed through the hall behind them. Noticing this, the people in the cafeteria began to run for the exits, eager to escape the danger. Norris, Calvin, and Sloan and Bertrand fell in with this group, and together they made their way out towards the terminal. They exited out into a large lobby where more people, likely passengers, were now heading towards the exit. Sloan pointed towards a set of gates past which his jet was sitting on the tarmac. As they took off running for the door at the end of far end of the airport, there was an explosion behind them. When Calvin turned to look through the dust and debris, he saw 4 figures emerging from the smoke. They were human, but something about them was otherworldly and uncanny. The lead was a tall male with a shaved head and heavy body armor. One of the 2 females carried a lit flamethrower, while the other carried a long rifle. The other male was carrying what appeared to be a minigun fed by a long chain of bullets from a pack on his back. The 4 of them eyed Calvin in unison and began running for him. Oh, fuck, Calvin said, turning and sprinting toward the rest of the group. He heard the sound of the roaring minigun and ducked behind a pillar. From behind the group, the insurgency detail operatives began flooding out into the lobby, firing openly at the 4 assailants. Distracted, they turned and engaged the security teams, and Calvin was able to come back around from behind the group and join them again. As they ducked and weaved to avoid the spray of bullets, Calvin occasionally caught a glimpse of the carnage taking place behind them. He saw one of the 4, a woman, lift an agent into the air and hold her flamethrower up to their face. The larger of the men had pulled a steel pillar out of the wall and used it to skewer 2 other men who writhed and dangled from it before slumping over and collapsing. A bullet pinged off a metal desk near Calvin, and when he saw from a distance the assailant with a long rifle slowly walking toward them and firing. He looked over toward the other 3 who were preparing to take off again. Down! He hit. Stay down! Sloan ducked beneath the table, but Bertrand stumbled and fell over a row of chairs. As he did, Norris chirped and stood to assist him. I lost my place. Let's see. Calvin heard the pop from the rifle and the pop from her skull simultaneously, as Norris's consciousness was reduced to a pink vapor. Sloan cried out as he was sprayed with the gurgling remains of Norris's gray matter, and a stooped Calvin had to pull him out from under the table. The 3 of them crawled towards the door as more bullets buzzed overhead. When they reached the exit, Calvin threw open the door, and together they ran out onto the tarmac. In the near distance, they saw Sloan's plane pulling onto the runway. It passed under another jet pulled into the gate, only narrowly avoiding the corpse of a headless agent that came crashing down towards them from a now broken window as the four Foundation's assassins appeared in the open space where the glass had been. Calvin didn't look back, but felt himself falling as Sloane nudged him slightly, just as a bullet brushed across his cheek. When he looked back, Sylvester was holding his leg and blood was pooling up through his pants. The man gasped and looked up at Calvin, and his expression went blank as another bullet burst through his heart. Another bullet crashed into the tarmac next to him, and Calvin rolled over to grab Bertrand, who was curled into a ball on the ground. Calvin could see the dire expression stretch across his features, a speechless fear accompanied by wordless chattering of his lips. The speakers on the runway all around him began to hiss and crackle. Then suddenly, a voice echoed across the airport, childlike and unnatural. I ran to, not the insurgent. Bring me the insurgent. Kill the traitor. Something like a wheeze escaped Bertrand's mouth, and suddenly he was up and trying to scramble away. Behind them, Calvin heard a dull thud as the tallest of the group, the one the voice had called Arantu, landed on his feet from 3 stories up and began to swiftly cross the runway towards Bertrand. No! Bertrand screamed, No! Let me go! Please, I beg! I'll do whatever you want! Please! Please forgive me! I don't want to die! The voice cut through the speakers again. Traitor! 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 Bertrand fell on his back and scrambled backwards away from the armored man who now stood before him. Arantu lifted a foot and brought it down on one of Bertrand's legs, shattering it with a splintering crack. He screamed and grabbed for his leg. Please! Please, Arantu, please don't do this! Please, I just wanted to live! I don't want this! Arantu grabbed Bertrand by his hair and held his head still with his right hand. With his left, he reached into his belt and produced a lean, black hatchet, holding it out in front of Bertrand. At the sight of it, the overseer began gurgling like an infant. A moment later, Arantu brought the hatchet up and then down into Bertrand's skull with a wet crunch, and then again, splitting it open as Bertrand's bloodshot eyes rolled back into his head. Dropping the hatchet, Arantu reached into the gap with both hands, and as easily as a person might open a bag of chips, tore the skull in two. Bertrand's body writhed on the ground autonomically for a few moments longer before it and the airport grew still. Calvin's breathing was heavy as the man approached him, but the roar of jet engines cut across the quiet. They both turned to see Sloane's plane lifting into the air at the end of the runway, and Calvin's heart leapt in his chest. Suddenly he heard the distinct spooling up of the minigun, and then a long line of screaming lead streaked across the sky, ripping into the plane's engines. The man holding the minigun held it on the plane with laser precision, and only after the craft stalled and fell flaming from the sky did he release the trigger. A pallid gray horror came over Calvin swiftly as he watched the plane burning at the end of the runway. He looked up just quickly enough to see Arantu bring a closed fist down on his face, and then he blacked out. So I'm pretty sure that means that Adam and Olivia just got killed. Okay, the fourth overseer. The fourth overseer. I fear this will be a disappointingly short entry. The fourth overseer is called the ambassador. Who's called the ambassador is little more than a frontman for the Foundation's PR efforts. He's often called anonymously charismatic, but there is no evidence to prove that. Instead, it seems he was chosen for the council by Green, and it was no longer fitting to trot Baron Hoadley out every time they needed somebody to say something on the Foundation's behalf, usually as a part of one of their front corporations. Goes by the name Jean Lemieux Bertrand, though evidence I've collected indicates he was born as Jean Ebrahimi, an Iranian. His parents immigrated to France when he was a child, and in his adulthood he became Bertrand, a French stage actor of some acclaim. However, due to the Foundation's involvement in his career, there are no longer extant original records of his activities prior to joining the Foundation. I've attached the address of his home to the back of the page, but you can go speak to him, but given the information I have about his backbone, it's unlikely he'll have much to say to you. Alright, so, that just leaves us with Overseers 3, 2, and 1. 1 is Aaron Siegel, and I guess 2 is probably Sophia Light. So that would just leave whoever 3 is. In any case, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. If you liked it, a like and a subscribe will be groovy. If you didn't, you don't need to do either one of those things. If you want to click the bell, you can do that as well so you're notified of future uploads. And I will see y'all in the next one. Later.